Hocus Pocus 2 is blatant nostalgia bait, but I don't hate it. Although reboots and remakes have long been a tried and true Hollywood formula, in more recent years they've gone with a different money-making tactic: sequels. These sequels have been put into production years or even decades after their original film was first released in the hopes of appealing to new and old audiences alike. These incredibly belated sequels have spanned a variety of genres and include The Craft Legacy, Top Gun Maverick, Coming to America, Ghostbusters Afterlife, Mary Poppins Returns, and most recently, Hocus Pocus 2. Released in 1993, the original Hocus Pocus film was considered a critical and financial disappointment, losing Disney tens of millions of dollars during its initial theatrical run. However, in the years since, it's become a cult classic and a pop culture phenomenon, something industry insiders attribute to its annual airings on Disney Channel and ABC Family throughout the month of October, making the film a staple of the Halloween season. With 3 decades worth of audiences falling in love with the film, and all 3 of the main actresses on board, it's no surprise that Disney decided to develop a sequel. But the question is it any good? In today's video, I'll be reviewing Hocus Pocus 2. I'll be explaining what I did and didn't like about it, as well as some of the changes I'd personally make. As always, this is my opinion, so it's totally fine if you don't agree. And of course, there will be spoilers. Let's get into it. In case you're unfamiliar with the original film, let's briefly go over it. In Salem, Massachusetts in the late 1600s, Thackeray Binks witnesses his little sister Emily being kidnapped by a trio of witches: Winifred, Sarah, and Mary, also known as the Sanderson sisters. They transform Thackeray into an immortal black cat and drain Emily's life force in order to make themselves young again, but are promptly arrested by the townsfolk for her murder. Before they're hanged in the town square, Winifred casts a spell that will resurrect the sisters on Halloween if a virgin lights the black flame candle in their cottage. Thackeray vows to prevent this from happening and spends the next several centuries guarding the property in his cat form. In 1993, new kid in town Max Dennison is forced to take his younger sister Danny out trick-or-treating, where they meet Max's crush, Allison, and the 3 decide to visit the Sanderson cottage, which has now become an abandoned museum. Max accidentally resurrects the witches, who attempt to suck the life force out of Danny, but Max is able to rescue her and they escape with Winifred's spellbook. In the hopes of catching the children, Winifred raises her ex-lover, Billy Butcherson, from the grave. The witches search the town for the children, hoping to make the spell permanent before the sun rises, but are thwarted by Max and his friends repeatedly. Billy Butcherson eventually reveals that he has no allegiance to Winifred and joins up with the children to stop the witches. The Sandersons attack them all once more and attempt to suck the soul out of Danny, but Max sacrifices himself to save her. Allison, Danny, and Billy fight back against the witches, and during the ensuing struggle, Winifred trespasses onto hollowed ground, turning her into stone. The sun begins to rise and all 3 witches are turned into dust, and their deaths break Thackeray's curse, finally allowing him to die and be reunited with his sister Emily in the afterlife. The film ends with Winifred's spellbook opening its eye, implying that the witches could possibly return, effectively setting up the sequel. Hocus Pocus 2 begins by taking us back to Salem in the 1600s, where a young Winifred Sanderson is banished from her village for her rebelliousness against the church and male authority figures. In order to not be separated, she and her sisters run away together, where they meet a witch who gives them the spellbook from the first movie, granting them their magical powers. The witch teaches the sisters to kill children in order to keep their youthfulness, but also warns them against casting the Magica Maxima spell, which can make a witch all-powerful, but with dire consequences. Fast forwarding to 2022, nearly 2 decades after the events in the first film, high schoolers Becca and Izzy are preparing to celebrate both Halloween and Becca's 16th birthday, and they turn down a party invitation from their estranged friend, Cassie. The duo visit a magic shop which was once the Sanderson cottage, because who in their right mind would let a piece of prime real estate just sit there empty? The girls are given a black flame candle by the store's owner, Gilbert, and upon lighting it, the Sanderson sisters are resurrected once again. Having heard stories of the Sanderson sisters, the girls do their best to distract them from wreaking havoc, but are quickly found out. The Sandersons make their way to the magic shop where they trap Becca and Izzy in the basement, and plan to use the Magica Maxima spell to seek revenge on Salem. The spell requires that they use the blood of their enemies, and they realize that Cassie's father, the mayor, is the descendant of the man who banished them from Salem centuries earlier. They force Gilbert to find the rest of the ingredients needed for the spell, teaming him up with the undead Billy Butcherson from the first film. They hypnotize the rest of the town and send them after the mayor, who manages to evade capture through sheer cluelessness. Becca and Izzy manage to escape from the cottage with Becca's newfound powers, and they make their way over to Cassie's house, where the girls make amends with one another. This reunion is interrupted by the Sandersons, who kidnap Cassie to use for their spell instead. Becca and Izzy follow after them, just in time to see the Sandersons begin the Magica Maxima spell. Although Winifred grows all-powerful, the price of the spell is what she cherishes most, her sisters, and they fade into dust. Winifred is immediately disheartened and begs the teenagers to help her save her sisters, and they oblige. The trio join together to become a coven and cast a spell which sends Winifred to the afterlife to be reunited with her sisters. The movie ends with the girls deciding to keep the spellbook and continue practicing magic together. Now before we get into the rest of the review, here's a word from today's sponsor, Care of. Unlike the Sanderson sisters, I can't suck the souls out of children to keep my skin and hair looking good, which is why Care of has been such a lifesaver. Care of is a subscription service that ships personalized vitamins, supplements, and powders right to your door. They only use high-quality ingredients that are backed by the latest research, so you don't have to worry about swallowing anything with eye of newt or a dead man's toe in it. Care of's quick and easy quiz asks questions about your diet, lifestyle, and health goals, recommending the perfect mix of vitamins and supplements for your specific needs. Because I'm trying to look young forever, I've been taking a combination of keratin and astaxanthin vitamins, as well as their lemon passion fruit collagen powder, and my skin is already feeling years younger. Unlike Billy Butcherson, Care of's daily personalized packs are made out of plant-based compostable film, which means they're not just good for you, but for the planet as well. Take Care of's online quiz and see what vitamins and supplements they recommend for you. Click on the link below and support the channel by using my code ModernGurlz50 for 50% off your first order with Care of. If you've seen other reviews on this channel, then you know that I'm not a huge fan of nostalgia bait, as I find it to be a rather cheap way of entertaining your audience. But in the case of Hocus Pocus 2, I think this reliance on nostalgia actually works in their favor, as the plot was never what drew me to the original film in the first place. It was the Halloween vibes, humor, and the killer chemistry between the three leads. In other sequels, callbacks can seem shallow and uncreative, but in Hocus Pocus 2, it's done with care, something I attribute to writer Jen D'Angelo, who grew up watching the original film every year for Halloween, and that love and familiarity with the source material shows in the work. The Sandersons remain true to their original characterization, with Winifred being just as bossy and controlling, Sarah just as flirtatious and ditzy, and Mary as submissive and desperate as the first film. While this lack of character development would usually work for a group of antagonists in a kids' movie, it winds up making the film's final act less believable. Instead of Winnie sacrificing her powers to be reunited with her sisters, a far more realistic scenario would be her lashing out in a blind rage and needing to be destroyed by Becca and her friends, not out of kindness, but necessity. Considering so many movies have attempted to reform their villains in recent years, I do wish they'd kept the Sandersons as wicked as they'd been in the first film. But considering Hocus Pocus 2's ending hinges on a redemption arc, I can understand why the choice was made, even if I don't love it. When the first film was initially released back in 1993, Bette Midler was the most well-known out of the three lead actresses, and was considered the primary box office draw, which is why the other Sanderson sisters, while ever present, were more sidekicks than anything else. In the last 20 years, things have changed, and Sarah Jessica Parker is now the most recognizable of the cast thanks to her time on Sex and the City, a show that the kids who grew up on Hocus Pocus no doubt watched when they became adults. The newfound popularity of both the character and the actress is apparent in the amount of screen time Sarah is given, now having just as many one-liners and quips as Winnie does, leaving Kathy Najimy with the short end of the stick as she's often pushed to the sidelines. This imbalanced power dynamic further hinders the film's final message, and I wish there'd been a moment where both Sarah and Mary actually teamed up to stand against Winnie's abuse. There's a brief moment like this in the film, but it's played off for laughs and quickly brushed aside.
I am not a fool. I am a good and loyal sister, and I expect to be seen as such! Shut up and get going! Of course, Winnie, with pleasure.
Considering Winnie is the reason all the sisters have to leave the village in the first place, it might have been interesting to explore the repercussions of that, perhaps with Winnie revealing that she acts so harshly towards them out of guilt for preventing them from living normal lives. It could also explain why Sarah went after Billy Butcherson, perhaps as a way of lashing out at Winnie however she could. Speaking of Billy, I find him to be a bizarre inclusion to the story. He wasn't a dynamic character to begin with, spending most of the first film with his mouth sewn shut, so I don't understand why it was so necessary to have him return. In Hocus Pocus 2, he's nothing more than a gag character who partners up with Gilbert, a similarly useless character. and their subplot is one that I found myself wanting to fast forward through.
Don't try to eat my brains.
Why would I
am so sorry I had to trick you, but I couldn't light the candle myself. It wouldn't have worked.
Well, why not?
Don't worry. We're here to help.
Yeah, you're a little late for that.
They're gone?
It's hard to improve on a classic, but one area where Hocus Pocus 2 is vastly superior to its predecessor is the acting. No offense to the child actors in the first film, but their performances leave a lot to be desired, and I've always struggled to become invested in their interpersonal relationships. Funnily enough, Leonardo DiCaprio was actually the original choice for Max, but declined the role in order to pursue What's Eating Gilbert Grape. I would love to spend a day in that alternate universe. On one hand, we'd have a far better Hocus Pocus movie, but would the course of his career have been the same? Just something to think about. Their story arc is also significantly more relatable than the first film, as almost anyone regardless of their age can empathize with the awkward emotions that come with a friendship that's on the fritz. Although it's something that we've all experienced to some degree, it isn't often depicted in film in such a realistic way, so it doesn't feel like a cliché. Max's "I'm the new kid in town and I have a crush on the hottest girl in school and my little sister is annoying" shtick feels far more dated and predictable in comparison. In Hocus Pocus, Max's relationship with Danny parallels Thackeray's and Emily's, while in Hocus Pocus 2, the teenagers' strained friendship mirrors the Sanderson sisters' dynamic. Although both work in the context of their films, I personally prefer the newer one. Back in 2018, a book titled Hocus Pocus and the All-New Sequel was released, which contained a story that focused on Max and Allison's daughter, Poppy. The vast majority of belated sequels follow a similar, remember those characters you loved? Well, here's their kid, storyline, and I couldn't be happier that Hocus Pocus 2 decided to go in an entirely different direction by introducing a new group of teens to go up against the Sanderson sisters. However, I think they might have bitten off more than they could chew, resulting in far too many subplots and characters for us to pay attention to. The movie has 4 subplots in total, which I think is too many, especially since the only ones you actually wind up caring about follow the Sanderson sisters and Becca and her friends. I think the film should have introduced the Sanderson sisters in Old Salem and had Cassie's ancestor, played by the same actress, accuse them of witchcraft, perhaps out of jealousy over Billy Butcherson, if you really wanted to tie everything together. By making Cassie the witch's target from the very beginning, groundwork is set for a stronger reconciliation with higher stakes and would also remove the unnecessary mayor father character, who doesn't do anything except giggle to himself and obsess over candy apples. Instead of Gilbert's whole "I saw the Sanderson sisters once and I wanted to revive them" thing, which isn't very interesting, Becca and Izzy could have found the candle by chance, maybe in the magic store's discount bin, or since the magic store carries copies of book, maybe they accidentally got their hands on the real one and made the candle themselves, which could foreshadow Becca's magical powers. Without Billy and Gilbert, the Sanderson sisters could force Becca and Izzy to find the ingredients for the spell instead, which would give them something to do instead of sit in a basement for half an hour, while also allowing Becca to become more familiar with magic. I actually like the addition of Cassie's himbo boyfriend Mike, so I think it's a shame that he wasn't utilized more.
And what's that?
A good luck charm in case there's a pop quiz.
Well, I hope not, because I didn't do the reading. You knew that was gonna happen.
Mr. Wilkie's a jerk. Of course he'd give us a pop quiz on Halloween. I made an inference.
Is that a spell? I don't make fun of you guys.
Yeah, you call us witches and say that we're weird.
Yeah, because you hang out in magic stores and always carry around colorful rocks. And I think it's weird. I thought I was just making conversation. I've got so many people to apologize to.
Even though he's insensitive, it isn't coming from a hateful place, which is something Becca and Izzy don't understand, which sets up the primary conflict between them and Cassie. If Mike had teamed up with them to help save the town, despite being terrified of the supernatural, they could have seen how much he cares about Cassie and understand that they were also responsible for the disintegration of their friendship. Many films say that you can only have one or the other, your friends or a boyfriend, and I think Hocus Pocus 2 could have done something different by showing that you can have it both ways. After all, would it be that bizarre for the people you love to have something in common with one another? Although I think that these changes could have made for a stronger film, I'm by no means saying that Hocus Pocus 2 is bad. It just could have been a bit better plot-wise. However, it is pretty entertaining, with the film being self-aware without being cringy, and referential without being repetitive.
Who are they performing for?
You!
Some of my favorite bits are the Sanderson sisters being tricked into going to a CVS for beauty products, and Becca muttering random vegan foods to sound like a spell.
Tempeh, chorizo, aquafaba, garbanzo, cacao, spirulina, cremini. Say that!
Tis the face of a child. A newborn! Oh, sister, what does it taste like? Raspberry.
Although the bit where they fly off on random household items was already done in the first film, I like that it made a return with more modern items, and the fact that the sentient Roombas actually had a payoff genuinely took me by surprise. I also love the addition of drag queens dressed as the Sanderson sisters, especially because the original film is so beloved within the queer community. It's not only a realistic addition, but it's a type of representation that we don't often see positively portrayed in film. These various updates are a clever way of adding contemporary humor without being cringy, and these jokes aren't so timely that they'll come across dated in a year or two. I will say that there are a few bits that go on a bit too long, but considering how camp and over the top the original film is, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Hocus Pocus 2 is by no means a perfect film, but as far as extremely belated sequels go, it's one of the better ones I've seen. Although I don't think it'll ever replace the original, I do think it has the potential to become a future Halloween classic. What did you think of Hocus Pocus 2? I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye!